My name is Colette Owens. 3 weeks ago, my 32-year-old parents sent me a text that completely destroyed any remaining patience I had with them. Don't come to our anniversary party. I read it 3 times, only guests from high society are invited. My circumstances, as if I were an annoyance to conceal, a challenge to handle. They wanted me to spend the night in my apartment, so I did. By myself. Silent. Invisible. My phone rang after that. Vivian. My older sister, the sociable one, the one who only calls when she wants something. Her voice was shaking, thin and fragile, maybe with remorse, maybe with rage. Why did you hide this from the family? She asked. I didn't answer at first. For years, I'd stopped explaining myself to individuals who refused to listen. I learned that silence might be survival, and occasionally, fuel. Before I tell you what happened that night, let me take you back 3 years. To the moment that changed everything. I grew up in the Owens household just outside Boston. A family who appeared flawless in each of their Christmas cards. Country club membership. Flawless lawns. Flawless grins. My folks used the neighbor who saw their new car first to gauge their achievement. Vivian, my older sister, had it everything. The looks, the charm, the husband from Goldman Sachs, the 6-bedroom colonial in Wellesley. Everyone loved her. Everyone celebrated her. And then there was me. I picked architecture, specifically historic preservation. I crawled through attics that were a century old. I battled to keep structures from being demolished by developers. I was once referred to as the one who does something with old houses by my mother when she introduced me to her reading club. I believe it was construction. My dad was direct. When you have a real career, he said one Thanksgiving, we'll talk about putting you back on the Christmas card. Back on. Like I had been wiped. The last time I appeared in a family portrait was 10 years ago at Vivian's wedding. I found out later that my mother had cut me out of the Facebook post. The composition looked better, she explained. I still have the original. I'm at the edge of the frame in a second-hand outfit. Vivian sparkles in Vera Wang. My parents glow at her. No one looks at me. I lived that way for 10 years, unseen to my own family yet visible to the outside world. But what I didn't comprehend then was this: my quiet wasn't weakness. It was constructing something. A power no one could ignore. 3 years ago, I received a phone call that would define my career. The Whitmore estate, a 150-year-old mansion in Massachusetts, was scheduled for demolition. Developers sought the land. The Historical Society had given up. But the National Trust for Historic Preservation wasn't ready to let it die. They wanted an architect who could convince the world that history mattered, that this structure was more than timber and bricks. They gave me a call. I was immersed in designs, renovation documents, and newspapers dating back to 1874 for 3 weeks. I did more than just show the board what Whitmore Estate could become when I gave my presentation. I showed them what it had always been, and why that mattered. Margaret Caldwell, the executive director, signed the approval personally. I preserved that email. Not because I'd need proof eventually, but because for the first time, someone in power believed in me. For 18 months, I put myself into its restoration. I tracked down craftspeople, hand-selected every timber, rebuilt rotten oak panels, plastered century-old walls, and spent months on the front doors alone. My parents never knew. I worked under my firm's name, not my own. I didn't seek attention. I didn't need it. And then life delivered a twist I could never have expected. The same parents who had deleted me from photos and Christmases chose Whitmore Estate for their 35th anniversary party, the building I saved, the doors I rebuilt, the legacy I protected. Irony finds its way to you. Naturally, I wasn't invited the year before last Christmas. But I went anyhow. Drove 2 hours through a snowstorm because some part of me still dreamed things may be different. My mother opened the door in a cream cashmere sweater, Hermes scarf neatly wrapped. For a moment, her smile wavered. "Oh, Colette, we weren't expecting you," she said. I held up a gift, a first edition on European cathedral architecture. "Without seeing," she said, "how thoughtful." Inside, Vivian flaunted her charity images. My father nodded at a federal judge. Nobody addressed me directly. "This is Colette," she introduced herself to an acquaintance from my mother's book club. "She does hammers, remodeling, and other stuff." I departed before dessert. My mother's sticky note, "Regift to charity," was still attached to my gift, which was still wrapped on the table outside. That night, I made a promise: I would never again step into a room where I wasn't wanted. 3 weeks ago, I received the text from my parents again, warning me not to come. I didn't reply. Certain messages are not worthy of a reply. But that same afternoon, a new package arrived at my door. The American Institute of Architects seal is embossed in gold on a heavy cream paper. With shaking hands, I opened it. "Dear Miss Owens, you have been nominated for the 2024 Gold Medal in the Emerging Voice category. Your restoration of Whitmore Estate acknowledged as a defining example of preservation excellence." 2 characters. One stating I wasn't worthy, one saying I was amazing. They both showed up on the same day. And just like that, the stage was set. My recognition, my family's celebration, and my exclusion all came together at one point when the truth had to be revealed. If you've ever been treated like you didn't exist yet still built something real, something lasting, you know the quiet power of patience. The years of silence, of invisibility, are not wasted, they are preparation. And this was just the beginning. The Whitmore Estate was more than a building, it was a story trapped in wood and stone, waiting for someone who understood language beyond words. And I, Colette Owens, was its translator. My first day on site is still fresh in my mind. The gates were chained, the windows shuttered, and the air smelled of dust, mold, and time itself. Children in the area whispered about ghosts. Some of the neighbors had stopped speaking about the estate entirely, as if ignoring it might eradicate it. But I wasn't afraid. I felt the house's pulse as soon as I stepped through the creaking doors, my boots resonating on the marble floors. It was weak, worn, but it still recalled grandeur. And I assured it that I would bring it back to life. I was consumed for the next 18 months. Days merged into midnight. I negotiated with city inspectors, architects, historians, even a lumber artisan from Vermont who refused to work unless the wood was aged exactly 140 years. I became fluent in plaster restorations, leaded glass restoration, and antique lock systems. Some nights I slept on the estate itself, on a fold-out cot in the library, surrounded by paintings whose eyes appeared to follow me, as if quietly assessing my every decision. It wasn't simply the labor. What was important was the attention to detail. Each panel, cornice, and brass doorknob had to be flawless. I couldn't allow anyone, especially my parents, to overlook the estate's essence. Because I knew they would come. They were usually drawn to the extravagant displays. Vivian, the golden kid, had already begun preparing her appearance, perfect hair, beautiful outfit, perfect comments to those who mattered. And my parents? They always performed better when the audience included someone else's appreciation. In the meantime, I became more recognized. Articles, mentions in architecture publications, interviews with local press. People dubbed me a visionary, a preservationist with an eye for authenticity. I smiled at the compliments, but they felt hollow without the estate itself. The house, eventually restored, was my canvas, my proof that I existed beyond their judgment. The night I got the official invitation then arrived. Not just from the National Trust, not from my colleagues. From my parents. "Colette, we hope you can join us at Whitmore Estate this Friday. Attendance is limited to family and chosen friends. I chuckled. The exact home I had saved was now the venue for an event hosted by my parents, who had disregarded me for decades. I should have felt victorious, but instead, unease crawled over me like a shadow. I gave Vivian a call. "Vivian, they invited me," I said. Her tone was clipped. "Oh. Well, be sure to look presentable." "It's Whitmore, Vivian." I restored it. "Exactly. That's why you should come," she said, almost mockingly. "Everyone will see. And I don't want you stealing the show, Colette." That was when I realized she was terrified. The same worry I had held silently for years, the fear of being overshadowed. And for the first time, the tables had turned. Friday arrived. I chose a simple dress, dark green, almost matching with the estate's ivy-covered walls. Not too showy. Not too modest. Just enough to be noticed, if anyone dared to peek below the surface. The driveway was lined with limos. When Vivian and her husband arrived, they were photographed by photographers from society magazines, grinning like royalty. With practiced smiles on their faces, my parents emerged holding hands. I went unnoticed by them. Not at first. I stepped inside. The estate shone under chandeliers I had rebuilt myself. The aroma of polished wood and ancient rugs permeated the air. Guests marveled at the passageways, the historic fireplace mantels, the refurbished ballroom. And then, the room turned significantly colder. At last, I caught my folks' attention. They went cold. Not because I was unattractive or awkward. Not because I had failed. However, I was indisputable. I nodded courteously to acquaintances who whispered my name as I passed them. They said that she was the one who brought Whitmore back. I've heard she prevented it from being demolished. Vivian's smile faltered. I saw it, admiration coupled with a spark of terror. My mother's hands trembled as she gripped her champagne flute. My father, normally so cool, shifted his weight uneasily. I didn't speak to them at first. I didn't have to. My presence was announced by the home itself. Every polished panel, restored floorboard, and antique chandelier that I had personally fixed was evidence of my abilities, something they had never bothered to look at. By the time dinner started, murmurs had spread. Guests came thanking me, complimenting my dedication, even asking questions about the repair process. I answered nicely, modestly, with the calm certainty of someone who has worked more than anyone else in the room. Vivian tried to halt my chats, but it was too late. People were truly intrigued. She made an effort to grin, but it fell short of her eyes. My parents gazed at each other, an unconscious dispute flowing between them. I recognized, then and there, that nothing I said or did could erase years of neglect, but my work, my presence, had already altered the story. Even so, a silent part of me recalled the youngster from the neighborhood who claimed Whitmore was haunted and the neighbors who had given up hope as I stood there surrounded by praise and accolades. Even though everyone else disregarded it, they were the ones who had faith in it. They were similar to me in that they were invisible until they were shown to be exceptional. That night, I discovered something essential: recognition is not granted. It is earned. And sometimes, it comes from the most unexpected places, the places you save while the world looks away. Whitmore Estate was no longer just a house. It was a sign. My emblem. And the next phase, the confrontation with my family, was unavoidable. The Whitmore ballroom shone like a diamond under the chandeliers I had spent months repairing. Crystal gleamed off polished floors, gilt mirrors, and the subtle swirl of velvet curtains. Guests sipped champagne, muttered in polite awe, and clinked glasses, completely ignorant of the tempest simmering just under the surface. I strolled softly, observing. My parents were at the center of a circle, laughing and nodding as if rehearsed. But the moment my eyes discovered them, something shifted. My mother's hands trembled a little and my father's jaw tensed, revealing the fear they were trying so hard to conceal. Then I noticed Vivian. Perfect hair, flawless smile, poised, my golden sister. But her eyes were calculating, her fingers twitching uncomfortably around her clutch. She had prepared for this night, every aspect rehearsed, but she hadn't counted on one thing, me. As I neared, Vivian's smile hardened. "Colette," she began, her tone syrupy, "I see you made it." "I wouldn't miss it," I said coolly, mimicking her composure. Everyone in the room already knew the truth, but her eyes darted beyond me and scanned the room as if looking for reinforcements. I had repaired the estate. I was the reason the house sparkled tonight. Every elaborate molding, chandelier, and polished floorboard was evidence of my labor. And yet, I felt an odd mix of satisfaction and tension. I didn't want to humiliate Vivian or my parents. All I wanted was acknowledgement, not for the cheers, but for the years of invisible work and the nights I spent by myself with ghosts and dust. Then it occurred. A guest, a renowned historian, approached me. "Miss Owens," he remarked, "the Whitmore estate is magnificent. Truly, your work is remarkable." I smiled sweetly. "I am grateful. It was a labor of love." Just as I was about to finish speaking, Vivian's hand suddenly shot out. "Oh, Colette, I'm sure you mean well," she continued, her voice dangerously sweet, "but you couldn't have done it without guidance." The historian gazed at her, perplexed. "Advice?" he asked. Vivian's smile faltered. My parents exchanged worried glances. I felt the room tilt slightly, the tension growing like a storm. "Yes," Vivian blurted out as she realized her mistake. "I mean, Colette had assistance in interpreting the family's history and the archives." I addressed her eyes directly, the calm in my words a jarring contrast to the increasing drama. "I did every step myself. I examined the archives, collaborated with the artisans, and oversaw the restoration firsthand. I had no guidance. No one." The historian's eyes widened. A few other visitors mumbled, catching on. Vivian's hands slumped to her sides, her facade faltering. My mother, who has always been a peacemaker, then attempted to step in. "Colette, sweetheart, let's avoid creating a commotion," I gave a hard yet gentle shake of my head. "I'm not making a scene, Mother. I'm speaking the truth." A pause settled over the room. Guests exchanged looks. Vivian's face grew pale. My father tightened his fists at his sides, the first serious display of emotion I had seen from him all evening. "You've done this yourself?" His voice was tight as he asked. "Yes," I answered. "I've completed everything." The ensuing hush was overwhelming. The kind of hush that spreads over a room when everyone understands someone has quietly, indelibly shown their worth, someone who has been unseen for too long. Vivian eventually spoke, her voice low, almost a hiss. You're showing off. You're attempting to humiliate us." "No," I answered. "I'm showing the house who it really belongs to." She froze. No insult was as powerful as the truth. And in that moment, I knew something essential: jealousy is a terrible enemy, but fear is stronger. Vivian wasn't just jealous of me, she was terrified. Afraid that the spotlight she had always claimed as her own could finally shift. The murmurs had grown by the end of the evening. Visitors complimented my work, inquired, and took covert pictures of the intricacies that had been restored. My parents made an effort to gather themselves, but it was too late. They had to acknowledge me now that their focus had changed. Even still, a part of me shivered as I exited the ballroom that evening. The battle was won, undoubtedly, but the war was only beginning. Vivian's jealousy simmered, my parents' fragile dignity faltered, and the estate, my sanctuary, had now become a battlefield. I learned then that recognition comes at a cost. Sometimes, the people you hoped would celebrate you first, feel wounded instead. And sometimes, the only way to live is to keep moving, to keep proving yourself, even while the shadows of jealousy and contempt grow longer. Whitmore Estate was more than a mansion that had been renovated. It was a stage. I had just finished my first act. The Whitmore estate's tall windows let in an abundance of sunlight the following morning, which spilled over the marble flooring and created long, pointed shadows in the hallways. The home was quiet, almost too silent, as if it were holding its breath after the events of the previous night. I walked down the main corridor, running my fingers along the polished railing. Every surface gleamed, not simply from the restoration, but from the careful attention I had given to every detail. I felt a surge of pride, but there was also a nagging strain. Even in her absence, Vivian's shadow persisted. A tiny squeak caught my attention. I paused. The noise originated from the library, an outdated and neglected area of the home that I had not yet thoroughly investigated. Curiosity overcame caution as I walked up to the door, watching dust motes dance in the morning light. The library was immense, filled with towering shelves of leather-bound books. Most were centuries old, their pages yellowed and delicate. But something struck my eye, a small, carved panel in the far corner of the room, practically concealed under a stack of old atlases. I knelt down and pressed lightly. A secret compartment became visible as the panel moved. My breath caught. Inside lay a bundle of letters, tied with a faded ribbon. I untied it carefully. The letters were from decades ago, written by someone I had never seen, an ancestor whose name I remembered only faintly from the family tree. But what I read made my pulse race: secrets, betrayals, and warnings about a hidden inheritance, one that may alter power and status within the family. Then I saw something much more unsettling, a hastily written entry alerting me to someone who would try to steal something that wasn't rightfully theirs. The description was unmistakable. Vivian. A shudder raced down my spine. Her jealousy wasn't just petty, it was dangerous. And now, it seemed, her ambitions could transcend beyond rivalry, beyond shame. With letters pressed to my chest, I hurried out of the library. The home felt different now, more alive and yet more ominous. Every shadow appeared to be watching, and every floorboard squeak sounded like a whisper. The estate had become a living witness to the family's history, and its possible doom. Later that day, Vivian appeared at the estate unexpectedly. My heart raced, but I met her stare with calm, controlled calmness. "Morning, Colette," she replied, voice honeyed yet tight. "I was hoping to talk." "About what?" I asked, maintaining a steady tone. Her gaze darted around the big hall, as if she were worried about being overheard. Then she moved in closer. "You believe you've proven yourself. Restored the house, got the plaudits. But do you realize what you've actually uncovered?" I tightened my grasp on the letters in my bag. "Vivian, I've discovered the truth. About the house, about ourselves." Her lips pushed into a narrow line. "Careful," she whispered. "Certain truths can be harmful. Certain things are destined to remain hidden. You're stepping into a place you don't understand." I didn't flinch. "I understand more than you think. And I won't allow fear, or jealousy, control me." Her smile was faint, almost harsh. "Colette, we'll see. We'll see how long that confidence lasts." A Chile breeze followed her as abruptly as she had emerged. I collapsed into a nearby chair, feeling both relieved and uncomfortable. The stakes of all I had worked for were rising as Vivian's shadow grew. I went back to the letters that evening when the estate slept beneath a crescent moon. Every warning seemed more pressing, every statement harder. One thing was certain: Whitmore Estate was no longer merely a home. It was a battleground of secrets, ambition, and long-hidden grudges. And in the heart of it all stood Vivian, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. I made a secret commitment to myself: I would not let her prevail. Not with the house, not with the family, not with my life. The next action would determine the outcome of the conflict, which was far from over. The estate was alive with a tight, almost electric intensity the following morning. Even the servants moved with a quiet wariness, talking behind closed doors. No one knew exactly what had changed, but something had. I remained in my study, poring over the letters once again in an attempt to piece together the family secrets, hidden wealth, and history of betrayal. Each page hinted at reasons, rivalries, and long-forgotten grudges, but one name emerged over and over: Vivian. She wasn't just a competition, she was a thread ingrained in the very basis of the Whitmore tradition. A harsh knock disrupted my attention. I looked up. Vivian stood in the doorway, her presence commanding the room. She carried herself with an almost predatory elegance, her eyes glinting like steel. "Colette," she murmured softly, "you're digging too deep. You shouldn't touch some items in this house." I did not get up. Instead, I met her stare steadily. "You're referring to items that you wish to manage." "Vivian, I don't fear the truth." Her chuckle was deep, dark, and mocking. "The reality? You have no idea. Some truths will ruin you if you're not careful." She moved closer before I could reply, and all of a sudden the air was thicker and the room felt smaller. Her hand extended in a chilling warning, not in a violent manner. "Colette, you've stirred the shadows. And shadows have a way of fighting back." I swallowed hard, but I refused to retreat. "Then let them fight. I'm prepared." Vivian's eyes narrowed. I briefly caught a glimpse of something unadulterated, such as dread, rage, or even desperation. Then she abruptly turned and departed as quietly as she had come. The remainder of the day went in a cloud of expectation. I became anxious at every creak, murmur, and flicker of movement in the estate's corners. The house itself seemed to be holding its breath, anticipating the impending confrontation. I noticed the tiniest noise coming from the library's secret compartment as darkness fell. Someone was there. With my heart racing, I walked softly down the hallway. As she stood there, Vivian went through the letters. She froze when she saw me. "So, you found my little secret," she muttered, voice cold but controlled. "You were never meant to touch them," I said. "The truth about you is revealed in these letters." A smile that stopped short of her eyes curved her lips. "The reality? There are truths even these letters don't show. The game is far from finished, even when you believe you have one." In that moment, I understood Vivian wasn't just a rival. I had underestimated her cunning. She had spent years creating a web of influence, manipulation, and concealed threats. And now, she was ready to utilize every weapon at her disposal. The conflict rapidly became more intense. Words became accusations, accusations became threats, and threats hung heavy in the air like storm clouds. The estate seemed to vibrate with tension, as though it knew the war was occurring within its gates. Finally, Vivian's mask crumbled. "You can't control everything, Colette. Some things belong to me." I stepped forward, resolute. "No, Vivian. Some things belong to the truth, and I won't let fear control my life." Her visage tightened, and she turned away, raging down the corridor. But as she disappeared into the darkness of the mansion, I knew this was only the beginning. The struggle for the Whitmore legacy had begun, and there would be no turning back. I went back to the letters and held them firmly. The home was silent again, but the peace was deceptive. Like a shadow that would not go away, Vivian's presence persisted. And I knew deep down that the true struggle was not just for the estate, but for everything I had strived to recover, including my family, my legacy, and my own feeling of authority. The night stretched on, and I finally allowed myself a time to breathe. I didn't sleep, but the estate did. Something old and perilous had been awakened by me. And now, I would have to face it head on. The next chapter had been claimed by Whitmore Estate. And I was determined to write it on my own terms.